Hey everybody, welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo. Even though it's not morning, it's the afternoon, so it's kind of a lunchtime Devo, that's for sure. It seems like I've been on this lunchtime Devo schedule, which is pretty cool. It's not bad at all. I kind of like it. Lately it seems like my mornings have been super busy, so it's nice to get in here in the afternoon and kind of do a little lunchtime. You know, my lunchtime is a protein bar usually, and today I got a little decaf because it's a little chilly in the office. And I'm not a big caffeine guy myself, but anyway, I hope you grab what you got, and we're ready to get in the Word. Hey, it's Thanksgiving weekend. We're going to be starting 2 Samuel this week. And, you know, gosh, we'll see how far we get, you know, by the time Christmas comes around in the new year. Gosh, we could already be, you know, have a good chunk of the Old Testament done by the time we get to the new year. So super cool. Glad you could join me on the devotions. These are my devotions. Time to just take a break from the day or the morning and get into the Word a little bit. You can certainly join me whether you listen to the archives at my YouTube channel at Bo Willette on YouTube. Just go to my name, Bo Willette, and you can check out all the archives, or you could always go to Calvary Christian Fellowship's Facebook page and check it out as well. You could always go to and watch the Devos on our website too, calvarychristianfellowship.com. And there's a little link on the front page that has my picture, and you just click that, and there's the devotion page, and you could always watch it there as well. So here we go. 2 Samuel, new book, continuation of the narrative of King David. Saul has died. That was in the last chapter. So let's get into it. It says, now, after the death of Saul, David returned from his victory over the Amalekites and spent 2 days in Ziklag. And this became kind of his kickback town away from home, so to speak. And it says, on the third day, a man arrived from Saul's army camp. He had torn his clothes and put dirt on his head to show that he was in mourning. What a way of mourning, huh? Back in the day, chuck some dirt on yourself. You know, it says tear your clothes. I mean, it's a really outward manifestation of the burden that's in your heart, right? And, you know, we don't quite do that today. You know, sometimes we still wear black, like at a memorial. And sometimes that's a picture of kind of the mourning that we have in our heart. Kind of, you know, for myself, you know, the beautiful thing about Jesus is that he has entered into death and literally changed the nature of death. This is the cool thing about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, where to many people, death is the end, right? Well, to the Christian, our death of our tent is the beginning. Whoa. Yeah, that's what Jesus has come to do. That's the meaning of the resurrection. So we don't really have to mourn or grieve as those who have no hope, but we have tons of hope. And, you know, before we know it, all of our tents are going to just be gone. That's it. They're going to die. That's right. So this guy, he's throwing on some dirt. He's tearing his clothes. And it says he fell to the ground before David in deep respect. Wow. That's pretty intense. Now, David, remember, has been head of the army of Israel. Started off as the armor bearer of King Saul. He's the one who slew Goliath of the Philistines. He's the one who is called by God to replace Saul as king of Israel. But he's been on the run from Saul for a long period of time. Now, it says, where have you come from? David asked. I escaped from the Israeli camp, the man replied. What happened? David demanded. Let me tell you how the battle went. The man replied, our entire army fled from the battle. Many of the men are dead, and Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead. How do you know Saul and Jonathan are dead? David demanded of the young man. And the man answered, I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning on a spear with the enemy chariots and charioteers closing in on him. When he turned and saw me, he cried out for me to come to him. How can I help? I asked him, and he responded, who are you? And I'm an Amalekite, I told him. And he begged me, come over here and put me out of my misery, for I am in terrible pain and I want to die. You know, sometimes when we're in terrible pain, you know what we want to do? We want to die. I mean, how many of us have lost good friends growing up, you know, because they overdosed on drugs? Not because so much they were partying as much as the pain that they were trying to cover up. I mean, how many of us have had friends like that, where they've had a back injury or they're dealing with emotional hurts and they don't know really how to deal with it. So they cover it up with, you know, drugs and alcohol and pills, prescription pills, and they end up ODing, right? But a lot of times they want to die, right? They just want to get rid of that pain. And I tell you, when our bodies are in pain, sometimes the way out that we see is death. That's the way to go, you know? And it's really hard to watch someone that you love and care for, especially, but anybody, any human, you know, anybody, even an animal, when they're suffering and in pain, right? You know, it's hard to see them continue and to suffer. I was watching a show the other day, and it was a cow or a horse that broke its leg, and it fell. And the owner got off, of course, fell off the horse. And he just knew that this horse was not going to make it, and that horse was in tremendous amount of pain. So he ended up shooting the horse. And, you just go, whoa, that's so hardcore. But you know what? Sometimes pain is so extraordinary that it seems like death is a mercy, right? Compared to the pain that you're going through. And this is how Saul was doing it. He was in a lot of pain when he died. And so this Amalekite says, and I killed him, the Amalekite told David, for I knew he couldn't live. Then I took his crown and his armor band, and I have brought them to you, my lord. And David and his men tore their clothes in sorrow when they heard the news. Now, this is really cool, and I think this is something that, I can really hone in on a little bit in the devotion, and that is, how is my attitude towards those that are, in a sense, my enemies? Jesus said, love your enemies. That's pretty radical. Love those who harm you, he said, right? Man, that is intense. This guy Saul has been going after David for a long time. And upon hearing of his death, you think David and his men would rejoice, right? I mean, let's face it, it was David's men that told David, whispered in his ear, hey, man, you could kill Saul right now. Why not do it? I mean, this guy's been after you for a long time. And David said, what? No way. I'm not going to touch God's anointed. God's the one who put this guy on the throne, and God's the one who could take this guy off, and God's using this guy in my life, and I am not going to go nuts. I'm not going to take it into my own hands, that kind of idea. And boy, that's a word in the New Testament for sure. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Is my heart like that? Do I have a heart that when I hear of even those who have tried to hurt me and they die, do I find myself mourning? Do I find myself seeing that God had a position and a place for them too? Do I see my heart break maybe of, man, the potential they could have had in God, right? But they kept neglecting their call in God. And man, and that alone bums me out. It makes me sorrowful, right? And here you see David, right? They tear their clothes, right? They go into mourning. And it says, they mourned and wept and fasted all day for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the Lord's army and the nation of Israel, because they had died by the sword that day. So there was a lot of things on David's mind. It was the fall of the nation of Israel to the Amalekites, right? To the Philistines, to those that were the enemies of Israel. I mean, let's face it, they should have drove them out years and years ago, but they didn't. And it just kept festering and kept festering and kept festering. And David mourned that. And above, and probably right along with that, he mourned the loss of his greatest friend, right? The one he made a covenant with, a brotherhood covenant with, Jonathan. And he loved Jonathan. And you remember the wonderful narratives we read in 1 Samuel about Jonathan. So this guy's heart's broken, almost broken upon broken, right? Just super sorrowful. God help us in that time of when we have sorrow upon sorrow in our life. Help us to be able to find some kind of joy in the morning, though there's so much, pain in the night, right? And, here we see that it says that David said to the young man who had brought the news, and hey, Laura, good to have you jump in a little late, and I'm glad you're going to catch up on YouTube. It says, then David said to the young man who had brought the news, where are you from? And he replied, I'm a foreigner and an Amalekite who lives in your land. Why were you not afraid to kill the Lord's anointed? David asked. Wow, isn't that interesting? You get an idea into David's heart of why David didn't kill Saul from what he says to the Amalekite servant. He says, weren't you afraid? Meaning, didn't you? David saw that killing Saul, God's anointed, man, was a big deal. And, it was such a big deal that there could be repercussions, serious repercussions for that. Now, this Amalekite is asked the question, hey, didn't you think of what could happen if you killed the king of Israel? Right? And then David said to one of his men, kill him, kill the Amalekite. So the man thrust his sword into the Amalekite and killed him. You have condemned yourself, David said. You yourself confessed that you killed the Lord's anointed. Wow. David inflicts, in a sense, judgment on this Amalekite for his, it seems like doing Saul a favor, right? And killing Saul when Saul wanted to die. But David saw that, man, no matter what Saul said about, taking his life, no matter what he wanted, you weren't to touch God's king, the one he has put in place. Man, that is some pretty serious honoring of a position, right? Some people want to die. And man, they want the shot. I remember my mom, telling me, before she passed away, man, I want just a shot. She would love just to get a shot, and that would have been it. Weeks before she passed, she wanted that, just because the pain was so great. But if I had that shot, would I dare to do it? Would I dare to give her that shot? Knowing that God has that purpose and plan for her. And, and it's that trial, and there is a redeeming aspect of the pain she's going through. And a lot of us don't see it. We don't go, hey, what is the redeeming aspect? But let me tell you, there is a redeeming aspect of the pain of our loved ones. And that is, we too get to see their courage and as they walk through that pain, as they hold on to faith in God through that pain, we too are going to do that. We too get to see it. Someone has to teach us how to suffer. Who's going to teach you how to suffer? Who's going to teach me how to suffer? We live in a world that moves us away constantly from suffering. We put suffering into a box. Who is going to teach you? Laura, who's a hospice nurse, she's probably seen, a lot of suffering. But if you're not in that position of a hospice nurse, or a nurse, or a surgeon or someone like that, maybe you'll never see that. Especially, doesn't mean that you'll see it in a loved one, especially. But we need to learn how to suffer. And that's what the New Testament talks about, the power of the suffering Christ. There's a power in the suffering servant, the suffering Jesus, that shows us too how to have courage through the shedding of this body. Jesus said, don't worry about what humans can do to your body, but instead fear the one who can cast your soul into separation from God, right? Into a hell, right? That's what we should fear. Man, that's pretty intense. Well, I need to fear, shedding this body sounds pretty serious, sounds pretty scary. And boy, I need to know how to do that. And so there is that redeeming quality, that courage, that hope, that faith that is seen in the suffering servants of God. And this is maybe why the Psalms of 116 says, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints, right? Why is it precious? Because it shows the value of God when everything is stripped away. What is valuable in those moments? Only one thing, Christ. That's it. That's all, right? He has the power to bring us back, right? To put us in the presence of God. Ooh, that is massive. Laura says, rather, I help patients through the end of their life and speak to them about the hope that I have because of my relationship with Christ through salvation he has given us. Isn't that great? So Laura, in her hospice nurse capacity, was able to be there and share and help bring hope to people who maybe didn't know the purpose or the meaning of suffering, right? And so, wow, pretty intense, right, narrative so far. So how does this end, this chapter? It says, then David composed a funeral song for Saul. Isn't that cool? David was a singer. David was a player. And what does he do? He prepares a memorial song, right, for Saul and Jonathan. And he commanded that it be taught to all the people of Judah. It is known as the Song of the Bow, and it is recorded in the book of Jasher. Now, we don't have the book of Jasher. That would be cool. It's also called, translated, the Book of the Upright. I saw in my little notes, which is very cool. You know, I like that Song of the Bow, right? Remember Jonathan and David and that whole idea of like, hey, I'll shoot the bow and that where the arrow goes, it'll tell you where I'm at. That was that whole narrative there. So it says, your pride and joy, O Israel, lies dead on the hills. Oh, how the mighty heroes have fallen. Don't announce the news to Gath. Don't proclaim it in the streets of Ashkelon. Or the daughters of the Philistines will rejoice and the pagans will laugh in triumph, right? So, hey, we're not going to share this with our enemies. No way. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor fruitful fields producing offspring or grain. For there the shield of the mighty heroes was defiled. The shield of Saul will no longer be anointed with oil. The bow of Jonathan was powerful, and the sword of Saul did its mighty work. They shed the blood of the enemies and pierced the bodies of mighty heroes. How beloved and gracious were Saul and Jonathan. I mean, this is amazing. This is from David. I mean, it's just unreal, right? This guy had a passion for Saul and Jonathan. He always remembered Saul, and he probably appreciated Saul. It's so funny. A lot of us go, Saul, is he really in heaven? Well, man, David loved the dude, right? David loves Saul, and David's a man after God's own heart. How about that? How beloved and gracious were Saul and Jonathan. They were together in life and in death. They were swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. O woman of Israel, weep for Saul, for he dressed you in luxurious scarlet clothing, in garments decorated with gold. Oh, how the mighty heroes have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies dead on the hills. How I weep for you, my brother Jonathan. Oh, how much I loved you. And your love for me was deep, deeper than the love of women. Oh, how the mighty heroes have fallen, stripped off their weapon. They lie dead. Wow. He mentions that beautiful love he had with Jonathan. He mentions the amazing passion that Saul had for the people of Israel. And so, in doing good things for the people of Israel. And I love this. David looks to the good. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things, right? Love rejoices in the truth. But I love that. Hopes all things, believes all things. Oh, man. Do I love like that? Does love hope all things? Is my love a hoping of all things? Is it a believing of things? Is it looking for the best, or is it always in the negative? Is that kind of my attitude? David has a really cool look at how Saul is. Of course, we know he's going to love Jonathan. We know that. But boy, he loved Saul too, and he respected Saul so much. And maybe, just maybe, us ministers need to respect Saul a little more too, right? Yeah. I mean, if King David writes this song about Saul, who am I to bash this dude, right? Maybe I'm bashing God's anointed, right? Not a good place to be, right? No. So some really cool things to contemplate in the chapter. Good things about kind of life and death, about God, redeeming